Faculty of Psychology at SRN International School, Jagatpura, Jaipur, Rajasthan. I am so glad to have you all here. And before I start the video, I would like to extend a warm welcome towards all of you. Now, this video is based on the chapter Human Development of class 11th subject Psychology, and this material is based on NCERT book, so you can also open your book and read the chapter. Now I would like to tell you some basic concepts that we are going to discuss here today. It would be factors influencing our development, and we will do some ecological model, one by Yuri and the second one by Durganand. And let's start the video without any delay. Alright, so let's start this first topic, that are factors influencing development. In this, the first point is genotype. The actual genetic material or a person's genetic heritage is known as genotype. All of this genetic material is not apparent or distinctly identifiable in our observable characteristics. Now, the next is phenotype. It is the way an individual's genotype is expressed in observable and measurable characteristics. It includes physical traits such as height, weight, eye, and skin color, psychological characteristics such as intelligence, creativity, and personality. So basically, genotype is the genetic material which is present in our body, or we can say that some genetic heritage, all right. But the phenotype is the representation of our genotype. That means things that we can observe from the outside, things with the help of our genotype which are there physically in your body. It could be a physical traits such as height, weight, eye color, skin color, etc. Alright, now let's move on to the next slide. These observable characteristics of an individual are the result of the interaction between the person's inherited traits and the environment. It is the genetic code which predisposes a child to develop in a particular way. Genes provide a distinct blueprint and timetable for the development of an individual. Genes do not exist in isolation, and development occurs within the context of an individual's environment. This is why each one of us is unique. Alright, let's move on to the next slide. Now, genes set the limit, and within that limit, the environment influences development. For example, a child has a genotype which predisposes him/her to be introverted in an environment that promotes social interaction and extroversion. The influence of such an environment may make the child a little extroverted. An individual with short height genes, even if he or she is in a very good nutritional environment, will never be able to be taller than average. Now let's move on to the next slide. Now, parents not only provide the genes for the child's development but also play an important role in determining the type of environment their children will encounter. Sandra Scar believes that the environment parents provide for their children depends to some extent on their own genetic predisposition. That means that she's trying to say that the environment that a parent is trying to give the child is actually dependent on the environment that they received from their parents. For example, if parents are intelligent and are good readers, they would provide their children with books to read, with the likely outcome that their children would become good readers who enjoy reading. A child's own genotype, what he or she has inherited. Now I'm telling you the meaning of genotype, such as being cooperative and attentive, is to result in teachers and likely parents giving more pleasant response as compared to children who are not cooperative or attentive. Children themselves choose certain environments based on their genotype. For example, because of their genotype, children may perform well in music or sports and they will seek and spend more time in such environments. I hope that you understood this slide. I know that this has so much information, but these are the important things that we need to remember. Alright, now let's move on to the next slide. Context of development. It does not take place in a vacuum. It is always embedded in a particular socio-cultural context. The environment can change or alter during any time of the individual's lifespan. Transition during one's lifetime, such as entering school, becoming an adolescent, finding jobs, marrying, having children, retirement, etc., all are joint functions of the biological changes and the changes in one's environment. Now, these are some basic points that we need to remember about development. First of all, that it does not occur in a vacuum, and second, that it is embedded in our social cultural context. That means it affects our environment too. It is there in our environment too. The environment can change or alter during any time of the individual lifespan. That means that our environment can change anytime, and also it can alter our life and our behavior patterns and our development. Now, transition from one stage to the another, or we can say from one part of life to the another, it could be entering a school or becoming an adolescent, then finding a job, then you marry, and then you have children, and then after a very long time of having a family, we retire from our jobs, and then we spend more time with our family. So these changes are both biological as well as they are the ones which is present in our environment. I hope that you understood this page. Now let's move on to the next slide. Now there's this person called Yuri Bronfenbrenner, and he gave a model, or we can say a theory, and it is called Bronfenbrenner's ecological theory. Now, the actual view of his developmental theory is that emphasizes the role of environment factors in the development of an individual. Now, he says that the environmental factors are very important, and we should emphasize on the environmental factors because it affects an individual. Now, there are some systems that he has given us. We will learn in detail about these systems in the next coming slides. Alright, so the first one is microsystem, second is mesosystem, third is exosystem, then macrosystem, and then chronosystem. Now let's start with the microsystem. Now, what is a microsystem? It is the immediate environment setting in which the individual lives. In these settings, the child directly interacts with social agents like the family, peers, teachers, and neighborhood. Now, then we have the mesosystem, consists of relations between these contexts. For example, how a child's parents relate to teachers, or how the parents view the adolescents, friends, etc. So the relationship between the parent, because parent and the family and peers and teachers, they all belong to the microsystem. And then what is the mesosystem? It's actually the relationship between the microsystem people. For example, how the child's parents relate to the teachers, or how they view the child's friends. These experiences are likely to influence an individual's relationships with others. Alright, now let's discuss the exosystem. Now, this includes events in social settings where the child does not participate directly, but they influence the child's experiences in the immediate context. For example, the transfer of father or mother may cause tension among the parents, which might affect their interaction with the child or the general amenities available to the child, like quality of schools, libraries, medical care, means of entertainment, etc. Alright, I hope that you've understood this, that the exit system is something where the child does not participate, okay, but they influence the child's environment or the child's experiences, okay. So, child here is not participating directly but is still being influenced, right? So, I hope that you understood this slide. Now, let's move on to the next system. Alright, so now let's discuss macro system and chrono system. Let's start with macro system. Now, macro system includes the culture in which the individual lives. So, we live in Indian culture, we have culture related to each religion, and we have culture related to each state. So, we can say that the macro system is something which is made up of our culture. All right, now we have Chronos system. Now it involves events in the individual's life course and socio-historical circumstances of the time. For example, separation of the parents or parents' economic setback and their effect on the child. Alright, so this can mean that some events that affect individual's life course, right? Or some circumstances that the child is presently in. So it could mean that the child is facing a separation of his or her parents, or we can say that the child is facing economic setback because of the parents, or we can say how these events, the separation and the economic setback, is affecting the child. I hope that you understood this. Now let's move on to the next slide. Now, Bronfenbrenner's ecological theory focuses on the social context in which people live and the people who influence their development. So, basically, this theory is focusing on two things: the environment that people live in, and also the forces that influence the person or their development. Alright, now let's move on to the next slide. Now, Bronfenbrenner's view is that a child's development is significantly affected by the complex world that envelops him or her. For example, children in impoverished environments have unstimulating environment devoid of books, magazine, toys, etc., lack experiences such as visit to the library, museum, zoo, etc., have parents who are ineffective as role models, live in overcrowded and noisy surroundings. As a result of these conditions, children are at a disadvantage and have difficulties in learning. Alright, I hope that you understood this slide. Let's move on to the next slide. Now we have Durganand Sinha, and he gave an ecological model in 1977. Why he developed this model? He developed this model to understand the development of children in the Indian context. That means that he basically focused on the development of Indian children and how they are developing in the Indian context. So, ecology of the child would be viewed in terms of two centric layers. Alright, so he's saying that there are two concentric layers through which we can understand the ecology of the child. Now, this is the upper and the most visible layer, now which consists of home, school, peer groups, and so on. Alright, so the first layer that he's talking about is the upper and the most visible layer, which consist, or we can say that this layer has our home, school, our peer groups, that means our friends and etc. Now there are some factors which influence this. Now factors influencing development of the child in the visible upper layer are home overcrowding, space available for each members, toys, technological devices used, etc., and nature and quality of the schooling facilities to which the child is exposed. So this means that the quality of the school and the facilities, the books, the stationery, the uniform and the food, lunch, everything that he is taking to the school or the school is giving him or her is very nice or is up to the mark. Nature of the interactions and activities undertaken with peer groups from childhood onwards. Alright, now I hope that you understood this slide. Let's move on to the next one. Now, these factors do not operate independently but constantly interact with each other. Now, the surrounding layers of the child's ecology constantly influence the upper layer factors. These influences are not clearly visible. They include general geographical environment, space, and facilities for play and other activities available outside the home, general congestion of the locality, and the density of population. Institutional setting provided by caste, class, and other factors, general amenities available like drinking water, electricity, means of environment, etc. Alright, now let's move on to the last slide of this topic. The visible and the surrounding factors, or we can say that the visible and the surrounding layer factors interact with one another and may have different consequences for development, right? The ecological environment can change or after, during an individual's life span. All right, so I hope that this was an interesting session for you, and everything that you need to know about the human development, factors that influence our human development, and the ecological model, both by Durganand and by Yuri. So you can see that here I've given a nice explanation. All right, so thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you have a nice day ahead. Bye bye. Take care.